Welcome to What Do Siblings Talk About?
I'm Jacob,
And I'm Veronica.
and we're siblings.
Yay.
And welcome back for episode 10. This episode is another arts episode. So in this case, we're talking about a movie called Serenity, which came out, Veronica, do you recall? 2005.
20 years ago.
So yeah, actually, it's aging. I would consider it a cult classic, or at least the TV show that it came along to sum up. The TV show called Firefly, I think qualifies as a cult classic now. So Firefly was a show which came out in, I want to say around 2003, 2002, 2003-ish, written by a fellow called Joss Whedon. For anybody who's unfamiliar with him, he is the brains behind the Marvel movies, as well as the TV show Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. Do I have that name right, Veronica?
Probably.
So anyway, Joss Whedon is not a nobody. And there are all kinds of theories as to why the initial show Firefly got canned. But basically, the initial show was slated for a full season, and about 2/3 of the way through the season, after only maybe 10 or so episodes had been produced, it was cut by the network it was being run on. And it was so popular after being cut that Whedon basically got the opportunity to sum up the story in this movie that we're talking about today, which is called Serenity. Serenity being the name of one of the protagonists of the TV show, specifically a spaceship. So, Veronica, is this a fair summary so far of what we're looking at?
Yeah. No, I think this is good. This was, it's meant to sort of wrap up the series of the original Firefly. Although I think many fans wanted sort of a 10-year run of the TV series instead, but they got a movie.
Yeah, and maybe that's something we could talk about in terms of there's something perhaps especially poignant about a show like this, which clearly was intended to be able to have a longer run to kind of we only get a glimpse of what we could have had, and that almost makes it more tantalizing because I do think it deserves the hype it gets, the TV show for sure. And I think I'll lay my cards on the table here in advance. I think the movie does a very good job of trying to wrap up the story and kind of satisfy some of those unclosed sort of character lines that were set out by the initial story. So I want to give the disclaimer here. For anybody who hasn't seen this movie, it came out 20 years ago, and we're going to spoil it heavily. We're going to spoil the TV show significantly as well. So if you haven't seen the movie, you don't need to go watch all the episodes of the TV show. This movie was actually...
It was meant to be standalone.
Yep. So, and in fact, I discovered the TV show through the movie. I watched the movie first. I enjoyed the movie. And then I went and saw the TV show and I said, wow, this is even better.
It's its whole backstory. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something I actually want to talk about. So starting here, we are going to begin heavily spoiling the movie Serenity. So go watch the movie. It's 2 hours. And then come back and you can listen to the rest. Veronica, pop quiz here. What genre is this movie?
It is a space western.
Yeah, I think this is what this is called.
It's the only space western. No, I think there might maybe a couple other ones, but
so see, I think
sci-fi.
Yeah,
broadly sci-fi.
Broadly sci-fi, but this maybe takes space western more seriously than any other space western. I think the other two big examples of similar genre movies that people would be familiar with are the original Star Wars trilogy and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think both of those fit similar themes. So this is sci-fi, it's set in the future, there is space travel, but the protagonists are regular humans dealing with regular human problems. We're not talking about some kind of alien race or advanced civilization. And like Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't know, maybe this crosses a middle line. Star Wars is very dramatic. It takes itself pretty seriously, and Guardians of the Galaxy is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, where it doesn't well, I'll say it takes itself seriously, but it's meant to be a very funny movie, and the characters are meant to be tremendously amusing, and I think they are. The TV show Firefly and the movie Serenity, I think, kind of walks in between those two. Would you say that's a fair assessment, Veronica?
Yes, although it's also hmm, I don't know if I would necessarily put it in between, because in other respects it's like it's very sort of small picture stuff that they're doing for the most part. They're kind of running around doing little things, versus I think Star Wars and Guardians of the
Hmm.
Galaxy, it's a much bigger scale of like galactic battles they're fighting. So I don't know. I guess I get the sense when I'm watching it that it's sort of a small screen, like, well, I guess it came from a TV show, but smaller scale, sort of more down to earth
Yeah,
representation of the genre. And it's also, when you compare it to those two, there aren't really aliens in Serenity. And even most of the sort of quasi aliens are things that were created by humans. So they're not real aliens. They're sort of like modified humans.
sure. Yeah, that's a good point about the characters, and maybe this does have to do with the backstory being a TV show. We are very focused on individual people's problems, and some of these problems and concerns and quests, as it were, have sort of galactic implications and connections. But yeah, we really are meant to care about the individual characters in the story. So that's a good point. I think this show also leans more into the Western side, which initially is not something I thought I would be interested in. I don't watch a lot of Westerns. I haven't watched a lot of Westerns. The genre isn't particularly interesting to me. But in this show, we have characters wearing a lot of cowboy
They have
boots,
the full
leather
cowboy
jackets.
thing going on. There's a lot of
Yeah,
saloon fights and, people drawing guns on each other. And yes, it is very much like a John Wayne movie, but with spaceships.
yeah, and don't think this is some kind of anachronistic kind of portrayal of sort of Western era technology in a space film. It's just Western era vibes, Western era
Yeah.
clothing, Western era music, some Western like behavior. Maybe this is Joss Whedon doing his best shot at space is the final frontier. Thank you,
Yeah.
Star Trek. Let's look at what a frontier kind of situation looks like and the way people behave
Yeah.
and the kinds of things they get up to and are concerned about.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's sort of part of when you're building the universe, that's sort of part of the backstory, is that all these people left Earth and went to populate these other planets. And on a lot of planets, they just didn't have any sort of modern resources. So they've kind of regressed to like 1880s America, because that's all they had. So like people are riding around on wagons and horses because that's all the supplies they got on their new planet.
That's a really good point, and you remind me of this. This would be considered a sort of great American novel. At least it would have been in a previous generation. Willa Cather is
Hmm.
the author, but My Antonia, which is a novel when I read it in college, I found it tremendously depressing. So there's a part of the spirit of kind of American or any kind of sort of pioneer vision to be in some ways very not really dystopian but anti-civilizational, I think. I
Yeah.
think My Antonia gets off to a bad start for me when the protagonist, Antonia, we're introduced to her neighbors who are German immigrants who have moved out to the American Midwest, which is the middle of nowhere, and the German father who had been like a clockmaker. And like you have to have achieved a high level of civilization to be able to employ people to make clocks, both the technology you need for the tools and the expertise and
Yeah.
the industry, as well as just to have money to throw at things like
Yeah,
clocks.
the sort of leisure income, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it tells you there's something serious going on there. And this guy, this German clockmaker ends up, I'm now going to spoil parts of My Antonia, so go read the book if you
It's
really
even
care. It
more
was
than
written.
20 years old.
It's more than 20 years old. Uh, after a couple years in the Midwest, where this clockmaker is stuck, grubbing in the ground trying to make enough food for his family to live on, he ends up committing suicide. And then later we meet his kids, and they're basically illiterate as adults. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, American
Yay.
pioneerism. wins again.
Yay,
That's
good
my
look in the Old
attitude.
West. Yeah.
Please flame me. Maybe we see a little bit of that kind of idea here in that this is also true in the TV show Firefly, that a lot of the places our protagonists are visiting are the middle of nowhere, people barely surviving,
Yeah. Like
just
dirt
managing to,
poor, yeah, bare
scrounge enough to live on.
subsistence living kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. So before we continue, I want to give a disclaimer on drama criticism. Both Veronica and I are actually, under pseudonyms, of course, very highly acclaimed film critics and should be respected as such. So
Constantly invited to various red carpet events to provide commentary.
yeah. So I say this in advance as a caution to actual art critics that these views are going to be very amateur. So the intro, Veronica, did Inception steal its intro from this? Because,
Ooh.
I've seen this movie a couple of times before, but I only recognized when I was watching it together with you before we recorded this, the introduction that we enter into as an audience ends up being a dream. And we emerge out of the dream and we realize, oh, we were in a dream, and the protagonist in the ensuing scene is misrepresenting himself to get something he needs.
Yeah.
And then that ends up being a hologram replay. And
it is
we emerge from the replay.
Inception.
We emerge from the replay, and the protagonist we emerge to sort of sit in the shoes of is misrepresenting himself to get something he needs.
Yeah.
So it's a clever device, but any thoughts on that?
I mean, maybe Joss Whedon was the originator of that. I don't know. You know how long that sort of storytelling trope has been around.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been done plenty. I think it's a clever instance of it, at least I would say. It's well done.
They do a good job, and it sort of grips you right from the beginning, where you're like, wait, what's going on? And then 2 minutes later, you're like, wait, what?
Right. So, and to put a little meat on the bones, when we emerge from the first dream, we're presented with our first two main characters, Simon Tam and his sister River. Simon they're from a wealthy family. Simon was a doctor. His sister River, I guess the character being portrayed is supposed to maybe be in her late teens or around 20. On a macro level, they're kind of the drivers of the plot, their life circumstances, even though they're not the main characters. So River has some kind of special abilities, and she's abducted by this secret government organization, and Simon breaks her out, and then they're on the run. And this sort of provides the underlying plot device for the story. Would you say that's fair, Veronica?
Yeah, it's interesting because they do sort of drive all of the action, particularly River, but they're not, you're right, they're not really the main characters. They're just sort of the setup for everything that happens.
Yeah. And in terms of the TV show, River is perhaps the least developed character, the most hinted around, and least developed, because I think Joss Whedon knew this when he was writing season 1 of the show, or participating in developing season 1 of the show. He knew she was going to drive the plot, and you can't just show everybody everything all at once around the character that you're gonna have to build your story arc around.
Slowly gonna come out in like season 2 and 3 as you kept watching.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the movie,
is she even? I'm trying to think back to the TV show. I don't know if she's even in the first episode. Maybe she is. But anyway, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I haven't watched it recently enough, so Firefly fans, please flame in the comments.
Not correct us for being wrong.
Exactly. Then the next character we're introduced to is a unique and new character for the movie. So this is the protagonist. I'm going to butcher the actor's name, but this is Chiwetel Ejiofor, whom I've seen in a few other movies and has a really interesting and unique acting style and character personality. So he's fun to watch. The one thing I think might be criticizable a little bit is, do you think, and he doesn't have a name. He's even in the credits, he's just listed as the operative. Guy. Yeah. Which is telling. Giving a character a name, well, for one thing, it humanizes them to some extent, but it also tells us a bit. This is a big important character in the story, and the fact that he's not named, I think, is a worthwhile device in the storytelling. Do you think he's overcooked? We were talking about James Bond a few episodes ago, and I was saying in the movie version of the James Bond novel, the main bad guy was ridiculously
like
overdone.
over the top. Yeah, but I mean, again, I wonder if it goes back to like this was supposed to be drawn out over a long TV show where, like, in their rush to fit everything into 2 hours, they're like, well, we just have to like bang, 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 smush all this stuff into a character, which yeah, kind of does give you the sense that he is almost like a cartoon villain, sort of.
Yep.
Yeah, and maybe that would have been more intriguing if it had been drawn out over a longer period.
Sure. Yeah, the difference in art form. I think it's also a mark of a good director that they can write good characters in a TV show and also in a movie, because as you point out, it's not the same thing. You're going to want to do similar stuff, but you have to do it differently. And this is a point I actually wanted to touch on, is after this opening scene finishes, we actually hit our main title credits. And interestingly, it's a new theme. Clearly, the idea is to actually, it's not just we're going to take what worked in the TV show and scale it up and give everybody those, oh, remember this vibes, good feelings. Like, no, they're actually doing something a bit different here. So the title music is a bit different. We start with just silent space and a quiet violin bringing us in. So
yeah, well,
I
which
like that.
which again is, it's back to, this is meant to be a standalone, and I think as much as it's meant to satisfy the fans of the original TV show, I think there's also an attempt to bring in a lot of new fans. Because, I mean, potentially, if this movie, goes blockbuster well, then they could restart the TV show. So
Yeah,
I think
there's
they're
still
trying
an
to balance
appetite for that.
There definitely is.
So, but sort of what I want to say from that is this movie is not made to mimic the TV show. It's made to complement it, I guess is how I would put it. So here, some things, when done extremely well, when they're done perfectly well, they're completely unnoticeable. And
yet
I don't know.
we the drama critics noticed.
What would be an example of something that's unnoticeable? A good I don't know, a good host at a comedy club or something.
Yeah.
They can do
Where
something so well,
it's
they
so
entertain you, but they're
effortless. Yeah.
yeah, but you don't see, they don't project themselves and kind of emerge strongly onto your consciousness.
Yeah.
So this movie had to do something really difficult, and that is character introduction of characters whom a lot of the audience knows tremendously well, and some of the audience does not know at all.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Well, we end up following our main character. This is Malcolm Reynolds, played by Nathan Fillion. I'm a huge fan of the actor and of this character. And we have him walking through what's almost the second character, the spaceship Serenity, meeting his crew members and passengers and just interacting with them in a fairly realistic fashion. And within about 1 minute, we have met and gotten a real sense of both the personal characteristics and actually interrelational dynamics of all the main characters of the show. So this includes...
It's impressively well done, because he basically walks like from one end of the spaceship to the other and kind of does like a lineup, but instead of going like, oh, this is Bob, he's in IT, and this is Susan, she makes coffee for everyone. Like, he essentially does that, but in a very natural way. So you instantly, all of the very diverse characters and what they're doing and what their personalities are.
Yeah.
Like you said, just it flows so well.
Yeah, and I think it does it so well that you can even... This is mostly Malcolm, Nathan Fillion's character, interacting with these individual characters, but you get enough of a sense of their personalities, you could probably imagine the relationships these characters have with each other, and sort of start preparing your mind for what that's going to look like. And on this topic, Veronica, I actually wanted to bring up another theme of a previous discussion, which is stereotypes. In talking about the Snow Queen, I think we talked about, or maybe it was the Snow Queen, one of our past discussions. We talked about
We've done so many now. They all blend together.
That's right. You lose count when you get into the double digits. We talked about the idea of someone presenting a piece of art, but mostly narrative art, so a story, and presenting you with a stereotype character where you can kind of immediately place them. Do you feel like the characters we're actually being presented here are stereotypes, or what are your thoughts on that?
Not necessarily, and I think that adds to how impressive it is because they're not quite cookie cutter characters.
Mm-hmm.
So to still like do that run through and introduce them all while also giving them nuance because there's sort of, I don't know, they're all very unique individuals. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that
And
adds to making it even more impressive.
I think this also bears on the difference between books and movies, where there's a tremendous difference in the ways in which your senses and imagination are being presented with material in a written story versus a movie, an animated story. Where in a written story, your imagination has to do a lot more work. And this is both a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because when you read a great book, something that really captures you, your imagination spins up an enormous amount of detail just unintentionally about the characters you're thinking about. I think for people who read The Lord of the Rings before watching the movies, this was one of the difficulties with enjoying the movies. And for people who watched the movies first and then maybe went to the books afterward, it's a struggle.
They could just picture the movies, but...
Well, they could picture the movies, but then that limits their ability to actually engage with the story because the movies are kind of taking the bounds and making it much more limited. So I wonder if in a written story, if there's maybe more value in presenting a stereotype initially so that you don't have to take a very long time.
You can fill it out yourself.
To develop a character, you say, look, picture this stereotype. And then you go and you whittle down the edges and try to surprise people with different views and build your character that way. Whereas in a movie, you don't need to present sort of a pre-cut notion. In fact, maybe it's bad if you do, like an over-the-top Dr. Evil character. It just comes off as boring and cheap. And
that's
unimaginative.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't think I ever thought of it that way.
I don't know that I did either, but that's why we're talking.
No, I think it is a fair point that because of the different mediums, just the way you set up your characters and your story is going to be different, and your sort of world building and character building are necessarily going to change.
So maybe we can say that about filmmakers in general, is that to be a good filmmaker, you need to be your audience's imagination to some extent. Yeah. And you can't, you're almost less there to write a story, to tell a good story, and more there to process something that's a little bit more prepackaged imaginatively. You're there to be a good imaginer.
Yeah.
So I think this is something Disney
that recognizes. Interestingly, and I don't know. I wonder if because the way you set up your characters in movies is different, because obviously you can show people everything in a way that you can't do in a book without loads and loads of description. That because of that, in order to sort of keep the movie interesting in a way to engage people, you would then dial down the talking, so to speak. So the script would be comparatively less explanatory in a film because you're able to show things, versus in a book where you're not. I don't quite know what I'm trying to say, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is maybe something we'll talk about later. But one of the nice things about this movie is they don't over explain stuff to the audience. They let you figure things out and fill in the blanks, which I think maybe because it's a movie provides a good balance to the visual aspects of where the whole visual side where you can't fill in the blanks because it's just presented to you, versus the book where the visual side of a book you're filling everything in. Maybe that creates a similar balance there.
So maybe we could propose a similar notion for visual storytelling as opposed to written storytelling or literary storytelling. Maybe there's the value in stereotyping characters in a story. or even stereotyping places in a story. Whereas in visual storytelling, maybe the idea is you almost need to use a stereotype as your story. The story itself needs to be the stereotype so
Yeah.
that the viewer can settle down into it and say, "Oh, I know the kind of story I'm in."
Yeah, because I think in a good, whatever media you're consuming, I think in order for it to be good, it needs to be engaging, and there needs to be an element that engages your imagination. So in a visual medium, the visual part of that is taken away because you're not really imagining everything, you can see it in front of you. So in order to create that engagement, that imagining in a film, you have to find that stereotype somewhere else so people can still imagine things while they're watching.
Yeah. So to just carry this similarity to a kind of even further conclusion, I'm just going to say this and maybe leave it at that on my end. Telling a good story in a movie, the story is the character. It's almost like the story is the person you're coming to see. And in the same way that in a book, you're there to engage the story through the characters, but here in the movie, the story almost is the character itself. Um, I'll throw that out there, and this is why you would have filmmakers complain and alternatively use very similarly themed stories. Every movie is going to be Seven Samurai. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's because that's your stereotype, and you're just showing us different characters who are modeled off that stereotype, but that's kind of the point in a movie.
Yeah.
All right, Joss Whedon's sense of humor. Maybe I find a lot of things funny. I find subtle things funny, maybe too much. But I was noticing in this movie. So, who are some of our main characters? We have Captain Malcolm Reynolds. We have River and Simon Tam. We have sort of side character Inara. Then on the ship we have Jane. He's a fighter, not spelled Jane, Jayne.
A man called Jane.
We have Kaylee, the sort of technician and engineer. We have a pastor called Shepherd Book, who's a part-time traveler. We have Hoban. I don't know did we ever hear him called Hoban? But this is Alan Tudyk's character. He's the pilot. Yeah, he's just called Wash because his last name is Washburn. We have Zoe, his wife, who's a fighter. And that's it on the ship. I mean, that's a pretty good crew already. That's 9 people right there. So where was I going with that? I wanted to get all their names out, but almost all of them are funny, at least at one time or another. So if you go to another story, I'm just going to abuse stories that I like and most people are going to be familiar with, so I'm going to go to The Lord of the Rings. Frodo is almost never funny. Sure. Aragorn is almost never funny. Faramir almost never funny.
Well, no, the comic relief is from the other hobbits.
Right. The comic relief.
And you have occasionally a dwarf.
Yep. You have Merry and Sam. You have some characters who sort of dabble in being amusing at times. Maybe Legolas is a little funny at times.
Yeah.
Almost all of the characters in this are amusing at times.
Have a sense of humor. And yet it's not like a comic program in any sense. Like, it's just that everyone has a good sense of humor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious comic relief is Jane, who is this Adam Baldwin is the actor. He's this brash mercenary type thuggy soldier he's a nice guy and he's very loyal, but he acts like he's not. And
lower level of education.
Yeah, and I was noting during the movie, this is like the character who set their emotion gauge to 2. There's not much emotional depth, which is used to great comic function in the storytelling, the fact that he has no emotional depth. So one of the things I wanted to say so first off, I think that's really hard to do, and it's an interesting kind of storytelling, but I think people will notice something very similar in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. This apparently is something that Whedon is particularly good at and interested in, is he can make pretty much everybody funny. And
this is like a random side point, but I forget.
That's the whole point of this.
Yeah, the whole podcast is just random tangents that we go on.
Yeah.
I don't have his Wikipedia page in front of me, but either his parents or his grandparents were sitcom writers, and wrote for, I think, the Dick Van Dyke Show and maybe something else as well. But I think that sort of comic back and forth repartee is maybe just something that runs in the family and that he probably grew up around and put in his writing as well.
That is a fascinating tidbit. But yeah, even side characters who just get run into periodically are oftentimes very, very amusing characters. And one of the things I wanted to say, which I think is related to this point as well, is I think one of the things that made this show so good and the movie really enjoyable as well is the characters are well written. They're very different. They're very complementary in a lot of ways. Just their personalities and character traits automatically produce a lot of dynamic interaction and action. But they're also tremendously well cast. And some of that good casting is really, really excellent actors.
Yeah.
You don't need amazing actors in every role, but some roles require a kind of subtlety and depth that you need good actors for. I think Nathan Fillion fits that. I think Morena Baccarin, the actress who plays Inara, fits that. Jewel Staite, who plays Kaylee, I think also very, very good. Alan Tudyk, obviously.
Yeah.
And then actually, I haven't seen Adam Baldwin in much else. I don't think he does a very good job of acting in this, but his character doesn't need it.
Yeah, no, he's perfectly cast for his character. But yeah,
this for me is like The
I don't know
Rock.
if I've seen him in
Yeah.
Simon. I don't think I've seen in anything else as well.
I would actually, Sean Maher, or I guess that's how it's pronounced. I think the weakest actors for the roles that they have to play in this show are Ron Glass as Shepherd Book and Sean Maher as Simon Tam. I think both of those roles could have used somewhat better acting.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, it's almost the sort of thing where all of the other actors are so good that those two guys sort of stand out, and you're like, well, wait, what are you guys doing here? But it's almost I feel like it's almost unfair to them because you sort of look and you go, well, why are you guys giving a 7? Everyone else is giving a 10. So yeah, I think maybe the expectation is so high from the other actors.
Yeah, maybe, and I think, again, to draw a similarity to another show, I think the actor for who's the King of Rohan in The Lord of the Rings?
Do not know.
This is
I have
shameful.
never
I'm
seen The Lord of the Rings.
blanking on this. The actor I don't think is very good either. He passed away a couple of years ago, but it's the same kind of thing. You're putting a good actor among sort of generationally great actors, and yeah, it's going to look like that. But this wouldn't be a great show or great movie if you didn't have those generationally great performers. So
sure.
It is what it is.
All those Canadians.
Is that what it is?
A lot of them are Canadian. I don't know. My theory is both Canada and in the UK, the weather is so adverse for so long.
You have to do something.
They have to occupy themselves. And so they produce really
Indoors.
Great actors.
Yeah.
And Americans, we just can't compete because our weather's better.
So we play American football instead.
We do other things.
This is a decent
We're
theory.
We're not bored enough down here.
Yeah, decent theory of civilizational development. I'll take it. One additional thing that presented itself to me while watching this is Joss Whedon. Okay, so let me pause briefly and continue with the story trajectory. Simon Tam has broken his sister out of this government facility where they're trying to brainwash her and turn her into some kind of psychic military
assassin
power. Yeah, assassin. They break out. We encounter these sort of corrupted race of sky-faring people called the Reavers, and they become a sort of villainous, chaotic element in the plot. And then we end up being corralled by our heroes end up being corralled by the government, by the operative and his unlimited resources, and end up sort of being forced through these sky-faring Reavers to this planet where it turns out the Reavers all came from, and there's some kind of echoes to River's own brainwashing. And anyway, we're driven to this point where we get a showdown where everybody ends up in the same place and they fight it out, and the good guys share the truth with the world, and everybody's all happy.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's some very meager skin on the bones. But in doing this, you have to walk a lot of lines creatively to tell a story like this. And to keep it interesting for viewers in the dramatic parts and the story revealing parts, how do you present the events of the story and people learning things? This is a movie that unveils itself bit by bit in a very satisfying way. How do you do that for your audience and your protagonists at the same time and make it enjoyable and realistic? Because
Yeah.
for me, the first way to ruin a story is to have either a protagonist who sees something there's no way they should have been able to see, or they don't see something that is right in front of them. I complained about this with both Ian Fleming's novel and the movie made from it.
Yeah, where it's slightly too unrealistic. You have too much suspension of disbelief.
Right. What are your thoughts on how Joss Whedon walks this line?
Yeah. No, I think in large part he does a really good job of presenting everything in a way that is believable, but also it doesn't over-explain either to the characters or to the audience. So, you have to pay attention along with the characters themselves as they're figuring stuff out and sort of plotting their next move.
Yeah, so I think the scene which really made me reflect on this is we have a scene where River is out on a little trip into town with the captain and some other members of the crew, and she's triggered. The government's been sending out these sort of secret triggering messages to try to get her programming to act up and make her cause a scene that will allow them to track her down. And this works.
Yeah.
So she's triggered, her programming kicks in, she beats up a bunch of people, probably kills some of them, and my immediate thought after the scene was I didn't recall exactly what happened next. And I said, will Malcolm and the crew figure out what actually happened? Because if they do, that's a little too clever. And if they don't, that's going to be really frustrating to me if they think she's just this rogue agent who can combust at any time.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that was resolved satisfactorily?
I think for the most part, maybe the characters were slightly quick to pick up on things, but I don't know. It's hard to put yourself in that position and go, if I had seen one of my friends do that in front of me, like where would my thought process go to trying to explain it? But I think he does a reasonable job of sort of their reactions and making that believable in something that would somewhat naturally happen.
Yeah, so it's a little Deus Ex Machina. We are introduced to a new character. Who's this guy? Or Mr. Universe. So this is some kind of computer nerd who has his, fake anime waifu, Robotronic wife, and, classic nerd in your basement who's really good at computers and stuff, who is able to kind of track down security footage of what happened, and actually kind of decodes what went on. A little Deus Ex Machina, but not too wild. So you're going to have to do something like that to give a satisfactory solution to a problem that us as the viewers, we knew that Summer was being triggered remotely effectively.
Right. Because
how do you make that realistic in the story?
From the beginning sequence, we have way more backstory than any of the other characters do.
And I think in general, this is sort of the detective story or the mystery writing quandary is to write a good story, you need to show different aspects of what's happening from different people's perspectives to your viewers, to your readers. But then how do you write the story when the people in the story itself don't have all those perspectives?
Yeah. Because inevitably the viewer or the reader always has more information than any given character. So how do you deal with that? Yeah. I think overall, Joss Whedon does a good job. I don't want to diss any specific movies, but there are a lot of movies that do a bad job at that.
So another topic I just want to throw out there, which I think is a Whedon special. Again, I'm not going to say he came up with this. I just think he's very good at it, is creating intentional echoes. So at the start of the movie, there's an important panel flies off the ship as it is taking off. And the same thing happens right at the end, which in sort of a very satisfying way. We have this phrase that Mr. Universe says, "You can't stop the signal," which ends up being very significant and is repeated. But this idea of creating echoes, intentional echoes within a story, where it's self-conscious echoes.
Yeah.
where it's n- it's not trying to be cute and like remember this thing that happened. Bet you don't remember this thing
Yeah.
happened. No, you remember it happened. It's just it's a resonance.
Yeah. And I think it's a mark of both good storytelling and kind of I don't know what the word for it would be, but like complete storytelling where you haven't left a lot of threads. You have a like unified overall arc that you've followed. In order to put those echoes in place, you have to have written a good story in the first place.
And I think sticking with the idea that in some ways the story is the character in a movie, putting in these resonant echoes is sort of a reminder. No, this is still the same character.
Yeah.
You're still engaging with that's the same person that was here at the start of the movie. I think it does a good job of that. Veronica, what would you say? How does this movie do at showing off pretty people? This is a topic I would like
Are
to
you
address.
just trying to segue into talking about Morena Baccarin?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to talk about Morena Baccarin.
There are a lot of
She's not the only
good-looking people in the movie.
not the only attractive
Nathan
person.
Fillion's good-looking.
And I noted we had to have the Sean Mayer shirtless scene included
I
as
do
sort of
not.
an extra at the end.
I don't think he's particularly good-looking, but I may be in the minority with that.
He's got a nice body.
He has, I think, what I would call sort of classically good looks.
Yeah.
But it's almost a little too clean cut. He reminds me of the guy who plays Superman, who I'm also controversially gonna say I don't find good looking. But I think it's because he's almost like too good looking, and it's sort of
Henry
off-putting.
Cavill.
Yes.
Have you seen him in his Witcher outfit and makeup?
No, maybe
You should look
with
that up.
long hair.
Yeah, and like some
Yeah.
scars.
Also
I think it actually works better. But I think part of what Henry Cavill and Sean Mayer are dealing with is that they're being cast in roles that are sort of supposed to be written for the classic good-looking guy type. So I did say while we were watching this together, and this reflects back on the first time I saw this movie, I think probably a year or two after it came out. When I saw it the first time, my reaction was, wow, Morena Baccarin is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen.
Is this why you were like, I have to watch the TV show now?
Yeah, this... Definitely.
She does not have a ton of screen time in the movie. She isn't even in the very beginning part because she's off on another planet. So
Right.
if you like watching Morena Baccarin, do watch the TV show because she's in much more of that.
Also, Deadpool. She's the girlfriend in Deadpool.
Yes.
20 years later.
And Casino Royale. She's a Bond girl in one of the Bond movies. Maybe
Okay.
two of them. Anyway.
There you go. So
we
a young
digress
Morena
yet
Baccarin.
again.
Yeah.
Were there other beautiful people you wanted to talk about?
I mean, Kaylee's fine. Adam Baldwin's fine. I mean, it all works pretty well. Summer Glau, River
Summer
Tam.
Glau's very unique looking.
She's a very unique look.
We're just gonna leave it at that.
That's that.
The most beautiful woman in the world, some fine people, and a unique person.
Yeah, this is not unique bad. It's just
This
when you
is what
see
gets you the top drama accolades.
there you go. Yeah, this is like in French, a one-way street is I want to say it's like sens unique is how they say it in French, but it's
A
like,
unique street.
yeah, there's only one of these.
Mm.
Or there's only one way on these. So when you see something unique, it's hard to compare it. It's hard to say, oh, I know what a normal dude looks like, and Nathan Fillion ranks very high on that scale. Summer Glau, it's kind of hard. You see her and you're like, wow, she's attractive, but very
Unique.
somewhat unconventionally. Story trajectory on this. Do you feel like this movie presented us with a realistic entry into the adventure? So initially, we're kind of floundering around a little bit. We're kind of getting to know the characters as they do side quests. And it's only about halfway through the movie where we realize the trajectory of this is our characters need to travel through danger to this distant planet. They need to figure out what's there. They need to share that with the world. And hopefully that will protect them from
Yeah.
reprisal by the bad government entities. And that's kind of our quest. Do you feel like the setup for our quest and then the solution of our quest kind of works?
Um, yes and no. I think overall it works. I do remember around the halfway point looking at at what time it was and thinking, "Oh wow, we haven't really gotten into this story and we're halfway into it."
Yeah.
Um and sort of feeling like the beginning dragged a bit. Maybe it's a function of it's a movie, not a TV show. So if you're watching the TV series, well, any TV series, you're sort of used to kind of jumping into the action faster, because you have this whole established backlog, and because this movie was set to be by itself, the
I
buildup
think
is a little bit slower.
I think there was also a really difficult task in that the whole point of the movie was to tie together a bunch of barely initiated story threads from
Hmm.
the TV show, which hadn't even been allowed to reach the end of its first season. So this is something the newer Star Wars movies, really the newest trilogy, the prologue trilogy, as it were, episodes 7, 8, and 9, really struggled with is taking story threads from the previous movie and going anywhere with them. I think part of the issue there was a lack of cohesive plot development by the directors. I think those movies desperately needed a single director. So I think it's impressive that this story is as good as it is.
Yeah.
I think the thing, there are a couple of somewhat unrealistic plot points, which I can accept some of. I think the biggest is how quickly our heroes find the solution, figure out what was going on this planet that they reached.
Yeah.
That happens very fast. You could probably add another half an hour to the movie and possibly make it more engaging,
More
but
realistic. Yeah.
to some extent though, you're transitioning from a character-driven TV show kind of drama into trying to turn it into a larger story. So it would have been that might have felt a little artificial as well if you actually drag out the big galactic storytelling
Yeah.
arc part.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, making it longer would have fixed some issues, but then I think it would have created other issues as well, because then you still have to do that whole build up at the beginning to kind of set the backstory for all of your different story threads. I think you probably get burnt either way.
Two other points I want to touch on briefly. One is the horror elements. When the protagonists actually encounter these Reaver characters, I think the horror writing and the emotions that it evokes are really powerful and well done. I think that's very well done for sort of a
Yeah.
B tier budget movie.
I think it's done very well. They're very scary. They're
Hmm.
basically like zombies, except they can move just as fast as normal humans.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned the one unrealistic thing about them is that you could have people acting like this, but they can function well enough to keep spaceships flying.
Biologically, how they function is a little questionable, but they're evil. They eat people and skin them alive and have no
And other
morals.
bad things.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think is well done is the use of character deaths. There are two, more spoilers, folks. There are two people who die of particular significance. Well, three. Mr. Universe dies. That's
We don't
fine.
care
He
about
wasn't a
him.
big.
He's sort of a
Yeah,
degenerate.
the pastor dies.
Which
And
also we kind of don't care about the pastor. So if you've seen the TV series, he's a much bigger deal and a much bigger character. In the movie, he's kind of an afterthought almost. When he dies, it's sad, but it's sort of like, okay, that character we just got introduced to 5 minutes ago is now gone.
but also both of those deaths are kind of broadcast. Like
Yeah.
we're introduced to their deaths because the protagonists in the story are introduced to things that lead them to think maybe these people are in trouble, or maybe they probably have been killed by now.
There's foreshadowing.
And then there's one death which is not foreshadowed, which is Wash. What did you think of that one, Veronica?
Yeah.
Do you recall the first time you saw this and what your emotions were at that?
Yeah, that one shocked me. And even watching it back, like knowing he dies, I was still surprised this
Mhm.
time because it's so sudden and so unexpected. Yeah, there's
But
absolutely
it's a very meaningful death.
No, absolutely. And I think, I guess, needed in the sense that he is one of the main ensemble of characters. And I think one of them needed to die because it kind of, if they all get out okay, it almost makes the story kind of too trite and too like
Yeah, you have no
neatly
stake in
tied
it.
up. Yeah. And it sort of eliminates some of the risk, right? If they all survived, you go, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. But for one of your main characters to die like that, it makes it so much more impactful, like how serious the whole mission was and sort of
And again,
what the risk was.
to complement the writing and direction of this, the initial death, so this is Alan Tudyk's character, the initial death is shocking and terrible, but only two members of the crew see it. And a minute later, you're made to reprocess it again through the eyes of another character when Kaylee finds out about this. And that was really well done. And again, just it heightened the stakes and
Yeah.
made you more emotionally invested in what everybody's going through. It's
Yeah.
just really good story writing.
Oh, that's sad because I mean, imagine if there had been another movie or TV show and he wouldn't have been in it because they would have had to do like backstory previous to Serenity or something to keep Alan Tudyk's character.
You can always just introduce a multiverse. That doesn't decrease the audience's emotional
No, not at
investment at
all.
all.
Or, maybe he has a twin who can marry his wife and take on the same role.
Shaw, the twins, Wash and Shaw.
Burn, wash and burn.
Yeah, so I think I said around, it was after this point, I think, in the movie, while we were watching, I said, or maybe after we finished watching the movie, at some point in here, I actually felt a sense of emotional tiredness, which I only get when I'm genuinely emotionally invested in something. It's not a bad tiredness, but it's you can feel the pathos through the characters, through the screen, and experience it yourself, which is good art for me. Anything else you want to say about this? Whedon does a great ending. It's hard to end this. A lot of stories are hard to end. Like, gosh, the James Bond novel on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
The ending of that is just like,
Yeah.
it's so sudden and leaves you like
Yeah.
not knowing what to do with it.
No, wait, what do I do now? It's I don't know what the name of the meme is, but where the guy is just sort of like sitting on the swing, staring off into space.
Yeah, but this ends with a bit of hopefulness and a bit of humor.
You sort of get the idea of like, okay, we conquered the bad guys and we're all together. It's a wash, and kind of we're off to our next adventure sense of like, okay, there's still ongoing stuff.
Just again, kudos to Joss Whedon and the team on being able to do that. I think you see similar things in the Avengers movies, and I think in Guardians of the Galaxy as well, where if you can end with a bit of humor and a bit of hopefulness, that gives people a satisfactory way to remove themselves from a very emotionally engaging
sort of step out
story.
from it. Well, and that's where a lot of the Marvel movies have the post-credit scenes, which I think serves that function of sort of a palate cleanser of like, okay, let's step away from the 2 hours of extreme emotion that you just went through, and here's a little second break before you go back to the real world.
All right, I think it's time for our random topic of the day. Veronica, are you ready for a random topic of the day?
Go for it. What do we
All right,
have?
Here we go. Wiki Roulette, what do you have for us today? Roots, a Slidehampton album. I'm going to recommend a reroll, Veronica, unless you are more into jazz from the 1980s than I am.
I think I know Roots album, but it's not this one, so, yeah.
Okay, let's hit next.
Donny
Donna
Yates
Yates
from
from
EastEnders.
EastEnders. Do you want to carry this this segment, or shall we click again?
Never seen EastEnders, but I do know what it is. At least I have some.
Yeah,
If not,
I'm familiar with the EastEnders. I haven't watched it. Please flame in comments.
it's all our British viewers.
This is a special one. Veronica, can you read us the top of this article?
It's John Tronson Bekenstock. It's by fake Norwegian accent. He was a Norwegian nobleman and member of the Biggestad family, one of the original noble families in Norway.
Norwegians Please flame in the comments below. This
Please
chap
send us
lived from,
voice memos with how to correctly pronounce this.
I'm going to guess it's Jan, but 1530 to 1593. So this is not a recent dude. Reported to be a direct descendant of Harald Gill, King of Norway. Ancestors were knights, married into Norwegian noble families, lenderman in service of King Magnus Erlingsson. This is fascinating to me that a dude who didn't do anything except be related to important Norwegian people has this much of a Wikipedia article about him.
I don't know. I feel like the Norwegians are fairly into their ancestry, or maybe Scandinavians in general.
Is that a particularly Scandinavian characteristic?
Maybe that's just my imagination, because I don't know. I mean, they still have a royal family, so they're fairly interested in maintaining some sort of line and history. And he's not like ancient. It's 500 years ago.
Topic for another episode, but I wonder if Europe is slowly, I don't know if it's even regressing, but circling back around to more imperial, monarchical forms of rule. Seems crazy because we're taught to think of history as only going in one direction, but I think we see this in China, that China's actually reverting more toward sort of traditional Chinese bureaucratic. Well, it's almost more like the civil service runs the show. Russia, obviously, Putin is leaning more towards Tsardom, and the people there like it. But I wonder if we're going to see something similar in Europe. And by I wonder, I mean it looks like to me.
By wonder, you mean I think it's happening.
Yeah, I think it's happening. I think that the temporary trend to representative government was a reaction to World War I and how dramatically awful that event was, and that it was kind of artificial in Europe. That most of Europe did not have that same tradition the way it developed in the British Isles over a long time, starting around the time of Magna Carta and in the United States.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to mention, names. Names are fascinating to me, and one of the first things I looked at, we're talking about Scandinavians and their genealogy, is this list. I looked at this guy's last name, and his last name doesn't end in son, but his middle name does, Trondson. And maybe this isn't a middle name, maybe they have two last names up here. And I scroll down the article, and yep, sure enough, his father's name was Trond.
Yeah.
So there we go. He does get the Trondson. And maybe that, I wonder to what extent the fact that if you live in a society where the children are named for the parents, like always carry the parents' name with them, if that is a reflection of a greater interest in family lineage, or if it actually generates a greater interest in family lineage, or if it works both ways.
Yeah. Because it's very obvious to everyone you're introduced to who your family is, because that's your name.
Right. This is also something you traditionally see in Jewish society, both pre-Christian and more recent. So like the more or less founder of the modern state of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, Ben is son of.
The Ben in the bar. Yeah.
So same kind of idea. There's something similar with a lot of Slavic names in terms of the family relationship is handled differently from traditional West European naming types. Traditionally in Western Europe, everybody just carries the name of the father's ancestry. Not the father's direct name, it's a family name. So that's what you're associated with. And in the United States, this is going to be the common thing. My last name is Mason because my father's last name is Mason. But it doesn't particularly refer to my father himself. It's the family name.
It's going back, yeah.
But I find it interesting in places like Russia, and I think this is to some extent true in Spanish-speaking places as well, where my uneducated understanding is a lot of times the sons will take the father's family name, but daughters will take the mother's family name.
Sure.
Which is another interesting way of dealing with that. This probably all bears some kind of interesting relationship, and I'm sure somebody's done a lot of studies and written volumes on what this means about the way people interact. But
like
if we could put it all together and say, what does this mean about the human condition, that we relate to our families in these different ways and that societies have developed? I think another one that's worth noting is most East Asian societies, the family name comes first. Like that's profound, where you're identified more with your family, more with the community than you are as an individual.
I would like to go back to where you're just named after what you do.
I think it is cool to run into names like a Wainwright or Carpenter. Um,
Because,
there are a lot
well,
of, yeah.
for one thing, I think it saves time because when you're introduced to new people, nowadays you have to ask their name and then you have to ask what they do. And it saves time if your name is just Jacob the philosopher. So this is like a shorthand there. But I think it's also it's it's very unusual nowadays, I think, for people to have a single occupation all their lives.
Mhm.
And in some ways, I think that's to our detriment as a society, that people will bounce in between stuff.
I think
And
this is
and
also
not saying
true
that you
socially.
shouldn't, but I think maybe things were better when people were more dedicated to a single trade or study for most of their lives.
I can say this actually as having worked in the United States and worked with children and the interaction between children from different families. In the United States, where social hierarchy is incredibly fluid, you can come from any background and go anywhere. So you can go from an incredibly privileged upper class background and end up homeless quite easily, or working a very mundane job. And you can do the reverse. And then I also taught school in a third world country, which had a much more stratified social hierarchy. And it was fascinating to me to see the interaction between classmates when there was an established social hierarchy and when there wasn't, and that there are actually some advantages to having a pre-established social hierarchy. And I think this is similar to what you're saying about occupation. It's not all roses, that nobody has an established occupation and nobody is set on a particular track in life.
Yeah.
There are downsides to that kind of chaos as well, that you need some solidity and some guidelines. There are bad things about it as well. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, I think there are downsides to both, but I think in some ways we would improve as a society if we had people who were more dedicated to a single thing rather than, oh, I need to switch jobs because, I had another baby and I need more money. Which, I mean, is a very realistic thing that I know a lot of people who change careers because of various legitimate reasons, but
I think part of the need to switch careers also is the incredible pace of social and technological change. I think the social change is largely driven by technological change, but the speed of technological change that has been experienced largely since the start of the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago, but even more so in the last, I would say, roughly 60 years, has made maintaining sort of traditional and reliable occupations basically impossible.
yeah.
So that
I
is
think
what
it's
it is.
also I don't know. And this is maybe a uniquely American thing, but the way certainly our white collar work system is set up, it's basically expected that you switch jobs every few years. And not necessarily switch whole careers, but certainly switch companies.
Yep.
Which I think is bad in a lot of ways.
Yeah, in the industry where I work, if you start out in the industry on the entry level, the promotion track is extremely slow. The only way to be promoted routinely is, you're going to have to pick up and move every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thoughts on society.
I'm sure Jan had the same problems in the 15 Norway.
No, probably not, especially with his background. Just going to say that. All right. I think it's time to say farewell to Norway. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Great
That's
talking
good.
as always. All right.